and welcome to another episode of Can I Come Over? So, as you may already be able to tell, today's episode is a little bit different. For those of you who are freshly new, or for those of you who are joining once again, nice to meet you all. My name is Renata, and I'm going to be your only host for today. Given that, all three of us, Nicole, Jovi, and I, are traveling back home for the summer and just getting to spend some time with our family, we have decided to take a little bit of a different format for the next few months. So, as a result of this, we are going to be having these shorter episodes that are going to be carried out individually by each one of us in alternating weeks, and then we still have a couple more episodes with the three of us that we have pre-filmed and will be posted over the next couple of weeks. So we do have a schedule planned out. We are hoping that this format works out a little bit better, and we still want to keep in touch with you guys. So this is the first of the video essays, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's definitely a bit empty. It's much harder because I'm really used to talking in between the three of us, so this is a completely different format, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I am nervous. But before we start getting into today's episode, of course, I'm gonna tell you guys about my week's obsession. A couple of days ago now, I think it's about 4 or 5 days ago, this artist called BB, who is a Korean R&B pop artist, I think. I don't really know if she does a bit of like, I don't say grunge because grunge is like the other, it's like a visual aesthetic. It's more like R&B and alternative and indie that she does. She came out with a new album called Eve Romance, which is really good. I like her music in general because she has a really good variety of songs. It is Korean, so if you're somebody that is very attuned to understanding lyrics, then maybe it's not the top pick, but just the general vibe that she has in her music and her approach to her albums are always super interesting. So I love her as an artist. I love her approaches, and I've been kind of keeping up with her for a couple of years now, so that's been my obsession for this week. Now, let's get into actually today's episode and kind of the thick of it. Let's get into the thick of it. Today, I'm going to be telling you guys about learning to talk to your inner child. This is a topic that has been very thrown around, not even as of recently, just for like years now. And the concept of the inner child, I think it's a very interesting one because it's one that one way or another we always come back and revisit, whether we like it or not. So what is actually the inner child? It's basically, to put it very simply, the little kid, the little version of ourselves that still lives within us. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're 10 years old, if you're in your 20s, if you're in your 30s, if you're in your 50s, in your 60s. It does not matter at what stage in your life. That inner child will always be within you. That version of yourself that still may be obsessed with cars or dinosaurs, or still likes to dance, or still is picky about eating tomatoes or having onions in your food, whatever it is, that version of yourself, it's still within you. And this term itself was actually first coined by a psychologist called Carl Jung about 100 years ago. And he points out that he points out the initial relationship between the quality of life as a child and the later outcomes that come out of it when you're in your later years of life. So it's something that has been looked at for centuries, over a century now, and something that still to this day psychologists are kind of encouraging patients, and therapists are encouraging people constantly to kind of connect. And it might be one of the easier things to kind of start digging into. Again, easier in parentheses. I do want to give a disclosure, as we always do with all of our episodes. Take what we say here and take what I'm going to tell you guys with a pinch of salt. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a professional. I'm just a girl in her 20s who is also trying to figure this whole thing out. I it's a process, and hopefully the things that we tell you here in this platform will be able to kind of help you out or help you maneuver different aspects in your life that you may be struggling with, or that you just need a little bit of guidance or even just a bit of reassurance. So make sure to do your own research. We always link every single one of our sources down below in the description, but if you're watching this on YouTube, and if you're watching this on Spotify, we will also make sure to link it. And so, yeah. Now, to kind of jump straight into it and to see kind of, okay, what do we do about this inner child, right? What is the whole deal about it? I read two articles. The first one was written by Angela Haupt, published in the Times, and it is titled, "Why is everyone talking about their inner child?" Again, like I pointed out, it is something that is kind of important and it comes up. And Angela Haupt quotes, "You might realize you're responding in a way that doesn't match your adult age because you're mimicking childhood behaviors and emotions." This makes sense. um, it's very, not necessarily often, but it happens frequently enough that you might be in a social setting, that you might be at work, that you might be on your own, and all of a sudden you're overwhelmed by all these emotions that you may have not felt in a while, or that may just seem very childish to you. Ugh, why am I so upset about this very small thing that is happening? Ugh, do I feel so overwhelmed? Why do I feel like crying? Why do people genuinely ask themselves that? And I have heard this from so many friends. I mean, like, I got home and I just wanted to cry. There was no apparent reason for it, but you're overwhelmed by these very powerful and childlike emotions that you may not be used to facing in your everyday life, or that you might be completely opposite, overwhelmed with them in your everyday life. And the reason for this is that as we are kids and as we kind of grow up slowly, we absorb and we learn and we perceive the world through our own little eyes. And the actions that other people have on us, the things that we experience, impact the way that we later are able to process our emotions and retain certain information or internalize even certain things. And again, Haupt points out how a wounded inner child may experience disconnect in some cases. So it may also be a reason why, if you are experiencing something very traumatic, if a family member has passed away, if there's a very big change going on in your life or something very pivotal, oftentimes people may tend to put a certain disconnect from that event, being like, oh yeah, X person passed away, but it's fine. Because you don't process those emotions in the way that, I don't want to say a normal person would, because the normal is a very kind of tricky thing to place, so to say. But ultimately, when you experience very difficult things throughout your life, your inner child responds the way that it learned how to do it throughout its life, based on, once again, those experiences, those ways, and all that sort of thing. So we all have childhood trauma. That is kind of the main point that I'm trying to get at here. We all have childhood trauma and we all perceive it and go about it in the way that we learned. And that childhood trauma is then impacted and reflected in the way that we go about our lives as adults or as teenagers as well. Why? Because we internalize it, we learn from it, and then we exhibit that behavior later on in life. Again, Haupt points out, and quotes, childhood trauma is associated with a sense that you can't depend on others to keep you safe and be there for you, otherwise called an insecure attachment style. That's just like a psychology term for it. But I think it's really important to realize and to point out as well that childhood trauma doesn't mean that you had to go through this extremely horrible thing in your life and it had to be so damaging and detrimental to you. Childhood trauma can come in many different ways and in many different forms. And it can be as simple as, for example, I see this with like a lot of people that I have met. If you spill something accidental, your initial response is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, immediate panic, immediate, someone's gonna yell at me, something's gonna happen. And you go into this override and oftentimes are consumed by anxiety when it's just a spill. You just spilled water. It's fine. It will dry. You can fix it. You can clean it up. It's fixable, so to say. If you accidentally drop a glass and it breaks, it's this, again, initial reaction of anxiety and fear and fight or flight that kicks in. It doesn't mean that you had to be abused as a child and all these horrible things, which for some people that is the case. But for others, it might just be that you got yelled at, that your parents may have acted up one time or a couple times or frequently when you spilled something, where you broke something, and it's accidents. Accidents happen. But when we experience it as kids, that's the only way that we know how the world works, is our close inner circle of parents or other authority figures that guide us throughout our life. And so when we experience that, we internalize it, and then again, we channel it as adults. So it's really important to address our inner child. It's really important to realize that, okay, there's a younger version of myself that is still living inside of me that needs to be retaught how to approach certain things. And in doing so and in working with your inner child, Haupt points out how it can work to promote autonomy, competence, and even at times a sense of empowerment. So it does ultimately improve your quality of life, as Carl Jung may have initially pointed out in his research. Now, how can we fix this? how can how can we fix a broken version of ourselves? And I think first and foremost is to acknowledge the fact that it's very tricky. And for every single person, this is going to be very different because the experiences that we had as kids are very different. The environment that we found ourselves in, the people that we were able to approach, the way that we were able to approach them, the support systems that we had, the social connections that we were able to have, and then as well, the kind of outlets and tools that we were provided or that we had at the time in order to manage all of this. There's a lot of things, right? But it can become very overwhelming. And this second article that I found, which was actually referenced by this original Times article that I previously mentioned, titled The Wounded Inner Child by Shirley Davies, points out how there is a very important need to create a sense of safety in order to combat forms of physical, emotional, or even psychological neglect that we may have experienced as kids. And the first and most important part is to kind of identify the signs that you have a wounded inner child. I think wounded is probably a better word than broken, because I think broken implies something that is somewhat unfixable or that we are lacking, whereas wounded has this implied sense that it's okay and that we can heal from it, because ultimately, acknowledging our inner child and doing so many other things to try to improve the way that we go about our life and as a form of just general self-improvement are crucial in the way that we evolve and we grow and we change when we enter adulthood and our later years in life. So first and foremost is to be able to identify the signs of a wounded inner child, to know what are the areas that you need help with and that you need to work on. Now, I'm going to list them off. If you feel called out, because I'm reading this, I felt called out multiple times. Do not panic, do not fret. We all need to work on a lot of different things. And if you are taking off every single one of the things in the list, or if you're taking one, or if you're taking many or the majority, it's fine and it's okay. And that is why this first step is so important, because if you were able to identify it, you're almost like halfway there. Because knowing that there is something wrong and acknowledging it is usually the first and most hard part of the entire process. So here comes a list. Identifying the signs: a deep feeling that there is something wrong with you, being a people pleaser, having rebellious behavior and feeling alive when in conflict with someone, being a hoarder, feeling filled with anxiety with something new, feeling guilty for setting boundaries, being an overachiever, being a perfectionist, having problems starting or finishing tasks, having constant self-criticism behavior, feeling ashamed of expressing emotions, feeling ashamed of your body, feeling a deep sense of distrust, finding conflict in avoidance, and a constant or just a very deep fear of abandonment. So there's a lot. And all of these things and all of these like signs, so to say, also overlap with a lot of other things. So first of all, we need to identify the signs. These are some of the many others, and there's others that are going to be a lot more niche. But in order to initially connect with your inner child, I think this is a really, really good base to start off. Second is to then acknowledge and validate those feelings and those signs. So out of, for example, fear of abandonment, you realize and you have to acknowledge, being like, okay, I have this, and you need to validate it, being like, it's okay for me to feel it. It is valid. There is a reason why I feel this way, and there's a valid reason why I feel this way, but we need to work on it. And then comes the big why, and kind of trying in one way or another to dig a little deeper. Think of the first time that you felt that way. Something that pops into your head. Really think about it and be like, okay, when was the first time that I can recall that I started feeling this sense of abandonment, or this, like the first time that I felt like I was hoarding something, or the first time that I felt like I needed to overachieve and then I needed to go above and beyond. And usually, surrounded by those kind of moments, you will find different patterns or different things of, oh, my parents said this to me, or maybe my teacher was pushing me to be this way, or maybe XYZ, or maybe this happened. And that will help you kind of reroute the way that you are starting to perceive these traits and these signs. And like I always say in the episodes, be kind to yourself because it can be very difficult when you're starting to dig deep, and very difficult when you try to start to work on yourself and to, approach kind of just self-improvement and connecting with your inner child. It can be very overwhelming. And remember that if other people have it figured out in your life, or that you see other people being ahead of you, it's not a race. We have discussed this in other episodes as well. It's not a race. And there are things that those people need to work on that you won't have to. And there are things that you need to work on that they won't have to. There are challenges in your life that you have experienced. There are things in your life that you have gone through that other people can have not or cannot even begin to imagine. And this is not in a way of like victimizing yourself of like, oh, I have it so hard, nobody will understand. No. It's in a way of being like, okay, this was my experience. My experience is valid. How can I work around it? Because these are things that have marked us throughout our lives. These are things that have shaped who we are. And we can't change our past. Our past is our past. And we have experienced all of these things, regardless of whether we like it or not. But it is now our job as older people, as older kids, so to say, as adults, to work on it, because we're going to be living with these habits and with these signs for the rest of our lives. And they can become exhausting to constantly have to deal with, because that's just your kind of subconscious way of handling things. And if you're unable to change those habits, then you might find yourself being very stuck and overwhelmed. So we're back. It can feel very overwhelming at times with all of these things and all these different like aspects of life that we have talked about, all the signs and so on. But I was talking to a family member not so long ago, my cousin, and she asked me, actually, she was like, hey, can you send me some photos of myself from when I was younger? Because they have a lot of photos from us. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I sent them over. And I asked her, I'm like, oh, what are you going to use them for? Because I thought, I don't know, maybe she was going to post something, or maybe she just wanted to have like photos of herself when she was younger. And she said, I wanted some photos of myself because I really need to take care of her. And I found that really beautiful. And I think that's probably, out of this comes my suggestion for you guys. I think that's a really good way to kind of begin to build a relationship with your inner child and with your inner self, like inner childhood self, because having just this physical presence and this like physical reminder of you when you were younger, because we're not seeing ourselves constantly every single day as like 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, but having this like physical reminder as a printed image of yourself from when you were little, I think it's a really good way of having that constant reminder of being kinder to yourself. And out of this also comes my journal prompt for this week for you guys. So have this photo out of yourself and think of what is something your younger self really needs to hear. It could be many different things, right? But for me, at least, that was, you can ask for help. You can make this journal prompt as long or as short as you want, but I think that for me specifically, this encapsulated a lot of the different things that I needed as a kid, or that I wanted to hear as a child. I, for various different reasons, felt like I needed to be very independent and very self-sustaining, even as a child. And I think that even manifested in different things of like, oh, asking for help to like open a jar or stuff like that. And for you, it can channel in a lot of different ways. And again, make this journal prompt or as long or as short as you would like. And revisit it whenever you feel like you need to connect with your inner self. And just simply by having this photograph, you can stick it somewhere where you will see it every single day, by your door, on your mirror, in your kitchen, somewhere where you will make sure to see it every single day, even like your wallet or carrying it around on your wallet. It could help a lot, being reminded of the fact that you're growing and you need to take care of that person. You need to take care of that version of yourself that still lives and manifests within you in various different ways and in various different forms of life. So with that comes the end of we come to the end of this week's episode. I hope that you guys liked it. It's a slightly different format, and it's very different than talking to myself compared to talking to another two people. But yeah, that is it. Let us know your thoughts, your comments. We will be reading you guys down in the comments below, in your suggestions, and do keep posted and do, stay on track on our Instagram page for any new updates and for anything new that comes your way. Thank you so much for joining us, and come knocking at our door whenever you want. Bye.